Welcome to Beyond Rent, the property management podcast brought to you by Rent Manager. Each episode, we sit down with an expert to talk industry updates, tech solutions, and top tips for those in the property management space. And now, let's get to the conversation and go Beyond Rent.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Beyond Rent. We all know that AI continues to be a topic of interest in all industries, including property management. So today we have Samantha from Colleen AI joining us to discuss AI and how it can help streamline services in our industry. As a quick reminder, Beyond Rent now has a video portion to our podcast. So if you want to watch the podcast, check out the links in the show notes. Now let's get to today's conversation on AI. Samantha, welcome to Beyond Rent.
Hey, Joe. Thank you so much for having me. So happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Like I said, AI is a topic that everyone's talking about. Everyone's interested in AI. So we want to learn more. And I think you have a lot of experience and understanding of what's happening in this space. But before we get to the topic, let's get to know you a little bit better. Go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us who you are and who you work for.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, everyone. My name is Samantha Bohm. I am the head of customer success over at Colleen AI. And exactly that, we really dive into the world of AI, and I'm so happy to share that with you today.
That's great. And tell us maybe a little bit about your background, how you got to be at Colleen AI, and maybe other experiences that you've had in technology.
Sure. This is actually one of my favorite stories to tell. My background is really in the multifamily industry. I started as a leasing consultant, worked my way up to a property manager, and then joined a corporate organization that worked on implementation and implementing softwares to benefit the multifamily space. From there is actually where I was introduced to Colleen AI, and I helped implement the Colleen AI product with that multifamily organization across 350 properties. So lots of great introduction to the team there, lots of hands-on experience. And then when some reorganization took place with my multifamily team, happily joined the Colleen side and now working as a vendor supporting hundreds of thousands multifamily entities across the U.S.
Your experience is perfect, right? Because you understand what's happening truly at the property management company. As a leasing agent, you really kind of saw what was happening, how things interact with residents, and how much is happening there. And then you got to move over and see how the technology piece fits in, and you actually saw how it was implemented as well. So your experience is obviously very, very specific and niche for what you're doing today. So that's great. And I think it'll lend itself to a great conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really great to be able to not only speak with clients about the product, but to speak firsthand and be able to provide recommendations or just get comfortable in some of the resident stories they share. I can definitely relate on a one-on-one basis.
That's great. That experience is perfect. Well, let's jump into today's conversation. So we're talking about AI, and a lot of people like to talk about AI, but I often wonder, what is it really doing in our industry? How are people truly using it today versus just talking about it in theory? So when I think about AI, I think also about automation and how we automate tasks. So help me understand how automation and AI kind of fit together at this stage.
Absolutely. And what I think really helps build the best picture is to provide a very specific example, Joe. So let's talk about automating rent collection communications and reaching out to your residents regarding their delinquent balance. If we're looking at a portfolio of about 100,000 units, 20% of those residents are not going to pay on time. That's 20,000 units that now those property managers or on-site team members are responsible for following up with. Can take hours, can take weeks. It's certainly something that takes a lot of manpower when it's left to a manual process. When we introduce AI and we introduce some of that automation, it becomes instantaneous. So instead of those 20,000 individuals taking weeks to follow up with, you're reaching them in just a few moments with simply a click of a button, basically, or an automatic process. You're able to reach that target audience. So that's a really great example that kind of quantifies how quickly we can start to approach and streamline those tasks.
Yeah, when you think about 20%, regardless of the size of your portfolio, 20% is a big percent, right? When you think about the number of residents and the number of staff that's involved and how you execute things like that. So I think that's a great example that people can understand, right? Right away, that's a pain point everyone has, that you need to collect rent. So let's dive a little bit deeper. What does that look like to automate that process? So you said it's a click of a button when you're actually trying to automate. How are people automating that? And then how is AI coming in to really understand and improve that automation process?
Really great question. So how it really works from the Colleen side is we understand the property's preferences and their guidelines. Traditionally, our communications will start effective the second of each month. And what that automation looks like from there is on the second, our tool reaches out, contacts your delinquent residents. And then the beauty of AI and some of that automatic intelligence is Colleen already has a lot of the answers. So if that resident responds back with, well, why is my balance so high? We do have the ability to provide a ledger breakdown. Really, another great example is what's my late fee going to be? Very repetitive question in the rent collection space, and it's a very generic answer. That's a rule and regulation in place. So by allowing the AI to now hold that conversation and have responses to the residents' inquiries, one, you're really starting to build a great customer service stream because the resident is getting that very quick feedback. They're not playing phone tag. They're not calling the office and missing office hours. An AI tool is really there to have the conversation when the resident's there to have it. And then it's pretty instantaneous. And then again, kind of circling back to the benefit is AI is going to facilitate that two-way conversation. These aren't just push out messages. It is that two-way communication channel where the resident's able to get answers based on some of their inquiries.
Yeah, and I think that's what's exciting about what we're seeing with AI. And again, a lot of people talk about it, and I think there are real life applications that are happening. And this is a perfect example where automation has existed for a while, like setting up an automation that would send out a message to residents that are past due based on a certain date range. We can do that. Like we've been able to do that in the past, but like you said, that was one way. They would get the message, and then and you were there working with residents. What would happen after they got that message? They would call into the office.
Yeah, and let's take that even a step further. It's not personal. You're not itemizing their exact balance and being like, "Hey Joe, you owe $300." That resident who owes $300 and that resident that may owe several months of rent is getting the same message. And how is that effective? We really want to work on tailoring conversations and ensuring that we're very specific with the residents. So some of the AI automation adds that personalization. We call it friendly but professional. There's could be a name involved. There's that exact balance involved. And it may allude to some of the next steps that take place. Like it is a very personalized approach that I think historically was missed in the industry. And that's where really AI separates itself from those push out messages is you're getting that personal touch.
Yeah, that's a great point. And when we talk about automation with a lot of people and even AI a little bit, one of the concerns is losing that personal touch, right? And in the housing industry, I think we've always had a little bit of a sense of pride with providing great service and having that personal touch, and automation did remove some of it, right? All of a sudden, it was a very blanket statement type message going out, and people can sense that. I mean, we all receive emails all the time or text messages where we know it's just an automated message that went out and there was very little thought behind me in my specific situation.
Yeah, very, very easy to find the delete bucket or the spam bucket there. A lot easier to engage in that conversation when you feel like someone is approaching you.
That's right. So one of the benefits I hear from this is better tenant communication. So maybe we can talk about that even further. So not only is it personal, but it can respond. So with AI right now, what are some of the typical responses that AI is capable of providing? Because even with AI, I imagine there are still some limitations where a human will step in at some point.
Yeah, sure. So there's a lot of responses that the AI is able to assist with and handle. Some of the workflows that we have built in place, if there's a scenario that's outside of the program's wheelhouse, the tool's actually able to escalate that to the office for some further involvement or guidance. And what's really great is our tool specifically is programmed that the property manager can respond through the AI channel. So what does that look like? For the resident, that conversation's taking place in the same communication thread. There's not an additional email, not an additional text messaging thread. It's all in that same channel to keep the conversation very uniformed. In addition, as more data and information is being pushed through the AI, it's always learning. So the more data that we're providing it and the more feedback that we're providing to the system from that property manager perspective, the more the tool is going to continue to learn. So not only is your resident getting a great experience, property management team now has like a single touch point to kind of look at those escalated cases. And then the AI tool is also growing and nurturing to be its best version of the product for that community.
Yeah, and that's another call out for AI that makes it different than standard automation is that learning portion of it, right? It continues to learn, it understands, and obviously it only understands what it has access to as far as data goes, right? But it does learn, it can pivot a little bit. And I think we've all used maybe a chatbot or something in the past where it wasn't quite AI, right? In the past, right? It was taking some data, some understanding of knowledge and some predetermined responses, and you'd end up in a loop with the chatbot, right? Where it would give you a similar response where you're trying to go a little bit deeper and it just can't understand what you're asking. So you just end up in this loop where I feel like AI understands its limitations a little bit better and can get you to a human when necessary, where chatbots in the past struggled a little bit with that.
Certainly. Yeah, that's exactly what I see in my experience and some of the differences there. Absolutely.
So let's talk about maybe some other examples of where AI is stepping in and really helping streamline different services. So we talked about rent collection and the communication piece there. How about things like lease renewals and the actual leasing process? Where do you see AI stepping in there? Because being somebody that was involved in leasing, that can be a very hands-on process and a very personal process for the prospect.
Absolutely. I think you really hit the nail on the head in talking about lease renewal. I think that's a piece of the resident journey that's really often overlooked. And from the multifamily side, there's a lot of legwork that goes into that. Historically, your multifamily teams are generating these offers, physically mailing them, posting them on doors, sending pigeons at this rate. Like, it is a very manual process. And there's always the resident feedback of, well, I haven't seen it. I haven't received it. It must have gotten lost in the mail. There's a lot of pain points that take place in that renewal process, where I think there's some benefits for AI to step into the renewal space. And what we're starting to see within Colleen AI is automating those communications 120, 90, 60, 30 days prior to the lease renewal process. And essentially what the tool is helping to communicate is advising the resident of where that communication is available, how they can access their lease renewal, and encouraging them to make that decision. So building that visibility really aids in the conversation. And then it aids the property management side, because now that conversation is taking place sooner. Residents have more access to their lease renewal information. And the property management team is getting notices perhaps further in advance, so they can, get that apartment ready to go to market and have a better forecast of what their expenses are going to be, or they're securing that lease and understanding who's going to stay. So it really helps in starting to understand the vacancy rates, the more proactive we are in that communication space.
Yeah, that's great. And one of the things we often talk about a lot in our industry is the resident experience. And we don't want it to be something that's cliche either. We really do care about that. But sometimes we notice that our processes and the procedures that we have don't really support that. And I think lease renewal is one of those. When you think that, how many times have we heard stories of residents feeling like they have to make a last minute decision on whether to renew or find a new place to live, and they feel pressure and they feel like somebody wasn't really caring for their experience in those moments. And so they decide to move, and it's a rush at the last second because they weren't prepared for the renewal process. So 120 days is a long time to start considering that. Do you feel like most property management companies are 120 days out at this point? Or do you think that's where tools like Colleen AI and others are coming in to help property managers be more proactive in that communication?
We see a lot of them at that 90-day marker, and the tools can certainly help support that 120. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that's important because you want it to be easier. And like you said, the benefit is right back to the property management company as well. Because if you know 120, 90, 60 days out, whatever it might be, that this person is going to move and not renew, you have a lot more time to figure out what you need to do next to prepare it for market, like you said. So the benefit is all around. Now, with tools in place and using technology, I'd also imagine that the property manager now has access to understand what is effective and not effective in that communication, when they typically get the best responses, the best renewal rates, and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. And to take that one step further, it opens up the conversation of why an individual may not be renewing. Lots of occasions where we're getting that non-renewal notice as a property manager, and you may not have insight as to the reason why. Our AI tool starts to help facilitate that conversation, and we actually track reasons for non-renewal, so you can see the most popular reasons for your community. And then it allows the team to be proactive. If someone is stating, "Oh, I'm moving out of state due to a job, I'm transferring," well, there's the step in the door. There's a really great way to, if you're moving from New Jersey to New York, refer this individual out to some properties that you may have in New York. And while you're losing the vacancy at your location, you could better support your entire organization as a whole.
Yeah, that's a really solid point. And if somebody's relocating because of a job, there's not a lot you can do to retain that resident, right? They've made a decision. They're probably not going to commute that far, right? There's reasons behind it versus, maybe there was an issue that you were unaware of. Maybe it was a maintenance issue, or maybe they're unhappy with the renewal rate or whatever it might be. But if you're blind to those reasons, then you may make assumptions, and the wrong assumption, and adjust. If you find out that most people are not renewing because of relocation, but you don't know that, you may decide to maybe back down on your renewal rates for no reason at all, right? That's not going to help save those residents.
Yeah, really, really great point there. Absolutely. It's like a blind adjustment. Having some of that data now can really push our decision-making skills and make sure that we're implementing the best practices for that specific community. Yeah, really great point there.
Yeah. So, and that leads me to think like, okay, so using data to really help make decisions. Where do you see AI is stepping in to help out the most with that? Because there's a lot going on in property management. There's a lot of different things that have to be handled, from the maintenance side to the marketing side to the resident communication. How do you feel AI is best supporting the ability to make wise decisions in our industry?
Sure. So I think we can attack that from like two pillars. One is through having access to more data. In AI, being able to facilitate larger conversations and having that unlimited capacity in the conversation space, we're getting more resident feedback. We're having more two-way conversations and really getting a better feel for how our residents are feeling and performing at their community. So just by having more data available and perhaps more individual and specific data available, it really aids in the data that we're kind of using as our decision-making pool. The secondary pillar is really going to be, how is this data stored and how are we visualizing it? And with AI tools, we do have the ability to provide centralized dashboards. And so with our program, there is a centralized dashboard for the renewal pillar, rent collection pillar, and debt collection pillar. Very nicely outlined and very specific to tracking trends within those workflows. And just by having that centralized view, I think really aids decision makers in seeing, okay, here's our community manager's actions. Here's our residents' actions. Here's the overall trends. How do we align the needs of all three to make the best decision? And you're starting to have more of that available in one view.
Yeah, that's the part that I think might excite me the most about AI, is this transformation of how we use and view data. In the past, it seemed like there was so much effort put into just collecting the data. And then once you had the data, how do you organize it? How do you structure it so you can actually use it for anything at all? And by the time you got through those two steps, your team was so exhausted that they weren't even analyzing the data at that point. Like, oh, it's there, it's in a spreadsheet, we have it. but it really wasn't being used because all of the effort was in the collection and kind of, again, the organizing of it, where I feel like modern technology, automation, all types of different ways, including AI, is getting us all the way to the point where we can just sit and look at it and understand it better. And it sounds like that's really kind of what you're speaking of is how do we collect better data and how do we visualize it faster and easier than what we've done in the past?
Yeah, and how to action on that data in a quicker manner. We're not necessarily looking at quarter over quarter or year over year information. In the AI space, it's so accelerated. We're looking month over month. I actually have a client in mind where we were starting to see their collections not dip down as much toward the end of the month. And they're like, hey, I noticed there's a bigger lull here in communications. Can we add a more strongly worded message and see if that piques individuals' interests? And we did. The next rental cycle, we were able to place a more strongly worded text message specific to what that client was kind of looking for or wanted to convey. And we saw a dip down in their collections at that point of the month. So it allows you to action and really put in some additional next steps on a much quicker basis to be effective on the location.
Yeah, and you got to think about how crazy that is and then the impact it can have on your business because, like you said, historically, that would have been maybe a quarterly decision or maybe an annual decision. And then you don't know the impact until maybe another quarter or year later, where now you're looking 30, 60 days down the road. And did that have an impact? And how do we pivot faster? How do we move quicker? So I think that's really interesting. I also think what's interesting there is the level of customization that's now afforded. One of the things I believe is for any company, including property management companies, to be successful, they have to operate uniquely and differently. And the technology should support that every time, right? So whatever systems they're using, if it's not flexible, if it's not customizable, then they're going to operate like everyone else in the industry. And that's not good for competitiveness, right? I want to excel. I want to move faster than my competitors. And what you just explained there was how your system specifically stepped in and allowed them to do something different than their competitors are doing and see results. That's really exciting.
Absolutely. That's really, as the head of customer success, that is my personal mantra with my clients is we're designed to be plug and play. We're designed to help ease your job and ease your experience, as well as provide the resident the best experience possible. So however we can try to provide those services and really ensure we're capturing the essence of your community or organization, we're happy to try to develop a plan to implement that. Because it's important. I think a buzzword too is centralization. You hear a lot of organizations talk about that buzzword and what that means. And it doesn't necessarily mean adding all of these products onto your tech stack. It's about finding that sole product or that sole workflow that optimizes the workflow and makes it seamless. If we're plugging in a bunch of Lego pieces and not making a picture, it makes it a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, no, that is a great example. I like the Lego example because we all remember as kids, like building things on our own with Legos and they didn't look like anything versus something that was structured and designed to be built a certain way and it comes out complete and whole and functional. I think that's exciting. And when we talk about centralization, it is a buzzword. And I think there's a lot of value there, but we also don't want to assume that each property needs the same solution or the same execution of that solution. And I think, again, back to your example of plugging in a specific message, maybe that message is only for a singular property that has certain data to support needing to make that change. So now you can get really unique and custom on a per property level. So you're personalizing at the tenant level, resident level, the property level. Lot of value in all of that customization.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So when we think about AI, we love to talk about the future, right? Because while we're seeing it right now, like I said, a lot of talk about AI still seems like it's a little bit in the early stages, right? Where some people are accelerating fast. I think in the future, AI is going to drive a lot of what we do. Where do you see AI in the next, I would say short term, and when I say short term, maybe 3 to 5 years? How fast is it going to accelerate? What's kind of the next phase of AI in our space?
Yeah, great question. I think there's a lot of value in ensuring that AI, and specifically in the multifamily space, is kind of acting like a digital property manager. Let's empower these tools to have the lease knowledge, to have the policy knowledge, and be able to streamline those very repetitive questions and processes. That, there's a checklist. Let's allow the tool to do the checklist, and then the manager oversee it, just like you may oversee a peer. That should be kind of how we're thinking and approaching, and really creating these digital assistants for ourselves. One other thing that I'm starting to hear in the industry and find really interesting is voice AI capabilities, and starting to hear some phone calls and seeing how we can enter that space. So I think that is a really great place for AI to start to develop in 5 years' time, is how do we add more communication structures, not even just specific to voice, but how do we continue to reach out to individuals as our technology develops as a whole?
Yeah, the phone call portion is interesting from the standpoint of allowing the resident to communicate in the way that they prefer. So if they want text, if they want email, if they want chat, AI, I think, is very capable in those spaces. Some will choose to call, right? So how does AI support people that want to call to get the right answers? And the idea of giving AI access to data is really important. Really, AI and really any technology, automation, when we think about all of these pieces and how technology works together, it's only as good as the data it has access to, right? So whatever data you give it access to is the level and degree, I think, to how effective it can be. And so how does your tech stack, right, all the different pieces you're using, how do they talk to each other to share data so that different AI components can leverage more data? Like you said, if you have different rules for the property, AI should be able to see those rules and understand those rules.
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to what we were talking about before of being flexible, we've seen very uncertain times in the real estate market between COVID and pre-pandemic conditions, post-pandemic conditions. Like, there's a lot of unknown as the AI grows, and to ensure that it has that flexibility, which is what I'm seeing thus far, and ensuring that we're creating and maintaining a flexible product for our users, I think is really important, because it is such a dynamic space.
It is a dynamic space. And something I actually read on LinkedIn this morning was a story about how a resident is using AI or used AI in a specific situation. And to kind of recap that situation quickly, they use AI to read their lease, and then they asked questions of AI about renewal. What are the renewal terms? Because leases are long, right? And not every resident understands. And they're able to read the lease and get answers about the lease that were accurate and timely for this resident so they could take action. And I think what I heard in that is, if our industry isn't figuring out ways to use AI to help us operate better and provide better service and better operations, we're going to be behind, because the residents, the consumers, are using AI, right? So we can't let the consumer move faster than we are as it relates to new technology.
So true. And that's pretty cool to hear. That's a really great thing to share. But yeah, is making sure that we stay ahead, or stay at least at the same pace, and make sure we're immersing and giving that full experience, because that's what they expect. And circling back and bringing this fulfilled, is it all goes back to the consumer's experience and that resident's experience. If they're not receiving it from your organization, or not receiving the customer service that they expect, they're going to look elsewhere. And expectations just continue to grow as these new technologies are being introduced. As you just shared, they're using AI themselves. That's the bar now that we have to surpass. So it's really neat to just continue to invest and investigate all of these tools to see what's going to best service their needs and their expectations at this point in time.
Yeah, that's a great point. And you're absolutely right. The expectation does grow. Consumers know that technology is out there. They, I think, are now expecting different things, and they'll get it from certain places, right? So if they experience it in other industries, if they see the travel industry or the retail industry embrace certain technology, when they go to the provider of their housing, they are going to expect that we are embracing technology just like others are, right? And they are seeing that already.
Yeah. Even just as simple, I'm just thinking about my days. We had an individual sign a paper lease at one point. We just had like a tech concern that day. We're like, print it out, paper sign it. And they're like, there has to be an easier way. And I'm like, there is. So just to think about, that's 6 years ago, how far we've come in 6 years in that space is pretty amazing. So definitely look forward to seeing what comes in the next 5 to 6.
Absolutely. Things will move very quickly. So, well, Samantha, as we kind of round the corner and end our conversation today, how can our listeners learn more about AI? How can they learn more about Colleen AI? What's the best way for them to reach out?
Absolutely. So you can always visit our website and book a demo at Collen.ai. That is the best way to stay in the loop on all of our activities, as well as connect again for a demo with our marketing team. You are also able to follow us on LinkedIn at Collen.ai. Lots of very exciting news located there. You will always also stay in the loop on some of these conversations. We post all of our podcasts and webinars, as well as any news. So follow us on LinkedIn and check out our website.
Excellent. Well, Samantha, I really appreciate your time today in this great conversation around AI. And thank you to our listeners for joining us for another great episode. And until next time, keep going beyond rent.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Beyond Rent. If you enjoyed this podcast, spread the word on social media and with your peers in the industry. To be notified when more episodes are released, subscribe using your favorite podcast player. Beyond Rent is brought to you by Rent Manager Property Management Software. Learn more about Rent Manager's industry-leading software solutions at rentmanager.com. Until next time, keep going beyond rent.